I never thought I'd be standing in the rain watching my son-in-law change the locks on the home I'd given to my daughter. The home where I'd raised her. The home where my husband took his last breath. "You can't just throw me out, Derek," I shouted over the downpour. He didn't even look up from his work. "Watch me," he said. "This house belongs to Abby now, which means it belongs to me, too." What Derek didn't know was that 20 years of teaching had taught me one valuable lesson. Always have a backup plan. And the deed to that house? It had a clause that was about to change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I used to believe that being a good mother meant sacrificing everything. My husband Tom and I had bought our Cedar Creek home 3 years before Abigail was born. It wasn't much at first. 3 bedrooms, peeling wallpaper, and a kitchen straight out of the 1970s, but we made it our own. Tom would spend weekends installing new cabinets or fixing the plumbing, while I planted rose bushes along the fence and painted Abby's nursery sunshine yellow. After Tom passed away from a sudden heart attack 12 years ago, the house became more than just a home. It was our sanctuary, the physical embodiment of the life we'd built together. Every corner held memories. The door frame with Abby's height measurements, the chip in the kitchen counter from when Tom dropped a cast-iron skillet, the creaky third step on the staircase that we never fixed, because it became our built-in intruder alert. "Mom, are you sure you want to do this?" Abby had asked me 3 years ago, her eyes wide with disbelief when I first suggested signing over the house to her and Derek after their wedding. "This is your home." "It's just a house, sweetie," I'd said, though we both knew that wasn't true. "Your father and I always wanted you to have it someday. Besides, it's too big for just me, and you two need the space, especially with Derek's real estate business taking off." What I didn't say was how desperately I wanted to keep them close. How the thought of Abby moving to another state with Derek terrified me. How I'd overheard Derek talking about relocating to Phoenix for better opportunities. The house was my anchor, my way of keeping my daughter near. The arrangement seemed perfect at first. I would keep the master bedroom downstairs, while they took over the upstairs. We would share the kitchen and living areas, but they would handle the mortgage, payments, and utilities. I'd help with my grandson Noah when they needed it, and everyone would have their space. "You're the best, Mom." Abby had hugged me tightly. "I promise we'll take good care of it." Derek had smiled too, though his gratitude felt measured. "This is incredibly generous, Catherine. We appreciate it." That should have been my first warning sign, the way he'd called me Catherine instead of Kathy or Mom like everyone else in my life. The formality created distance, as if he was already planning his exit strategy from our arrangement. The problems began slowly, almost imperceptibly. First, it was little comments about my decorating choices. "Don't you think it's time to replace these old curtains, Catherine? They make the living room so dark." Then it was rearranging the furniture without asking. "The couch works better facing the other way. It opens up the room." I tried to be accommodating. After all, this was their home now, too. When Derek moved my collection of antique teacups from the dining room hutch to a box in the garage, I bit my tongue. When my gardening tools disappeared from their usual spot by the back door, I simply asked where they'd been relocated rather than complaining. "We need that space for Noah's sports equipment," Derek had explained, not meeting my eyes. "I put your things in the shed out back." My weekly bridge club meetings, which I'd hosted for over a decade, became a source of tension. "Could you maybe meet at someone else's house next week?" Derek would ask. "I have clients coming over and it would be more professional without." He never finished the sentence, but the implication was clear. Without me and my aging friends cluttering up the place. Grace, my closest friend from the bridge club, noticed the change in me before I did. "Kathy, you're walking on eggshells." "In your own home," she observed one afternoon as we had coffee at Bluebird Bakery instead of my dining room. Is everything all right with Derek and Abby? Of course, I'd replied automatically. They're just settling in, finding their rhythm. It takes time to adjust to living with your mother-in-law. Grace hadn't looked convinced. And how are they adjusting to living with their mother-in-law's house exactly? I'd laughed off her concern, but her words stayed with me. As I drove home that day, I realized I'd begun parking on the street instead of the driveway because Derek had mentioned needing both spots for potential client visits. I'd started watching my television shows with headphones so I wouldn't disturb them. I'd even begun scheduling my showers around their routine. Without realizing it, I'd made myself smaller and smaller in my own home, constantly accommodating their needs while minimizing my own. The real turning point came 6 months ago, when I came home from volunteering at the Riverside Community Center to find Derek and Abby in a heated discussion that abruptly stopped when I walked in. Is everything okay? I'd asked, setting down my purse on the entryway table, the one piece of furniture that had remained untouched because it had been my grandmother's. Derek and Abby exchanged a look that made my stomach drop. Mom, Abby began, her voice gentle in that way that immediately signals bad news is coming. Derek and I have been talking, and we think it might be time to reconsider our living situation. Reconsider? I repeated, though I understood perfectly what she meant. Derek stepped forward, assuming his professional realtor demeanor. Catherine, we appreciate everything you've done for us, giving us this beautiful home. But Noah's getting older, and he needs more space. We've been thinking about converting your bedroom into a playroom for him. I see. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. And where would I? There's a lovely senior living community. Just 15 minutes from here, Derek continued smoothly, as if he were pitching a property to a client. Oak Ridge Apartments. Very modern. All one-level units. Perfect for someone in your position. My position? I felt my cheeks flush. I'm 63, Derek, not 93. I don't need senior living. Mom, Abby intervened. What Derek means is that it would be easier for you. No stairs, no yard work. People your own age around. People my own age are right here in this neighborhood, I countered. Frank next door, Ellen across the street. My whole bridge club. My whole life is here. It's not that far, Derek insisted, and we'd come visit all the time. The discussion went in circles for weeks. I reminded them of our agreement. They reminded me that the house was legally theirs now. I pointed out how much I helped with Noah. They suggested I could still babysit, just not live with them. Every, conversation ended the same way, with Abby in tears, Derek frustrated, and me feeling increasingly unwelcome in the home I'd built with Tom. I began spending more time at the Riverside Community Center, volunteering additional hours just to be somewhere I felt valued. That's where I met Hector Ramirez, a retired lawyer who taught chess to children on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You look like you're carrying the weight of the world, he commented one afternoon as we were both cleaning up after our respective programs. Something about his kind eyes and direct manner broke through my usual reserve. Before I knew it, I was telling him everything. The house, the arrangement, Derek's increasingly transparent attempts to push me out. Hector listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. When I finally ran out of words, he asked a question that changed everything. The deed to the house. Did you have a lawyer draw it up, or did you use a standard form? I blinked, surprised by the specific query. My sister's friend is a lawyer, Samantha Jones. She handled it for me. Hector nodded. And did Samantha suggest any contingencies? Any conditions for the transfer? She did, actually. I remembered the conversation clearly. She thought it was risky to transfer the house outright without protecting myself. She included some clause about right to residence or something similar. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. To be honest, I didn't pay much attention at the time. I trusted Abby, You should get a copy of that deed, Hector suggested mildly, just to refresh your memory. That evening, instead of going home, I drove to my sister Eleanor's house. Ellie had always been skeptical of my arrangement with Derek and Abby, calling it a disaster waiting to happen. But she'd respected my decision and kept her opinions mostly to herself. So he's finally showing his true colors, she remarked when I explained the situation. I never trusted that man. Too slick by half. Ellie, please. He's still Abby's husband and Noah's father. She waved away my defense. And you're still my sister. Let me call Sam right now. Samantha Jones arrived an hour later with a folder of documents. Her professional demeanor softened when she saw my distress. I wondered when you'd be calling me, she admitted, spreading the papers on Ellie's dining room table. I had concerns from the beginning about this arrangement. You did? I asked, surprised. You never said anything. Client confidentiality, she replied with a small smile. You were determined to give Abby and Derek the house. My job was to protect you as much as possible within the parameters you set. She pointed to a section of the deed highlighted in yellow. This is what you need. I read the legal language slowly, trying to understand the implications. What does this mean exactly? Samantha's smile widened. It means, Kathy, that while you did transfer ownership of the house to Abby and Derek, you retained a life estate for yourself. In plain English, they cannot legally evict you from that property during your lifetime without your consent, regardless of who owns the title. But they've been saying... It doesn't matter what they say, Samantha interrupted gently. What matters is what's legally binding. They either didn't read the fine print, or they're hoping you didn't. A strange feeling washed over me. Part relief, part vindication, and part sadness that it had come to this. What should I do now? Samantha? Close the folder decisively. That depends on what you want. You could assert your legal right to stay in the home. Or you could negotiate a settlement that compensates you fairly for vacating your life estate. Negotiate? I echoed. The life estate has monetary value, she explained. If they want you to leave voluntarily, they should compensate you for that value, enough for you to purchase or rent a comparable home, not just some small apartment in a senior complex. Ellie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. You should make them pay, Kathy. They can't just toss you aside like yesterday's newspaper. I took the deed home with me that night, tucked safely in my purse. I didn't mention it to Derek or Abby, not yet. I needed time to think, to decide what I truly wanted. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Derek sitting alone at the island counter, scanning property listings on his laptop. He glanced up briefly, his greeting perfunctory. Good morning, Catherine. There's coffee in the pot. I poured myself a cup, gathering my courage. I've been thinking about what you and Abby have been suggesting. His posture immediately changed, becoming more attentive. About Oak Ridge? I can set up a tour for you this week if you'd like. Actually, I said carefully, I'm not interested in Oak Ridge. If I'm going to move, I'd want something more like this. I slid my phone across the counter, showing a listing for a small but charming bungalow not far from the community center. Derek's eyebrows rose as he noted the price tag. That's quite ambitious, Catherine. The Oak Ridge apartments are much more reasonably priced. For you, perhaps, I replied, maintaining my composure. But I don't think they'd provide the quality of life I've become accustomed to. He frowned, confusion evident on his face. I'm not sure what you're expecting here. We're offering you a solution that makes sense for everyone. For everyone? I echoed, taking a slow sip of my coffee. Or just for you and Abby. You know what I mean, he said dismissively. Change is hard. I understand that. But you need to be realistic. I am being realistic, Derek, I said, pulling the deed from my purse and placing it gently on the counter. Very realistic, in fact. He glanced at the document, irritation flickering across his features. What's this supposed to be? It's our deed, Derek. The one you and Abby signed 3 years ago. I thought we should review it together, especially the highlighted section on page 3. As he reluctantly pulled the document closer and began to read, I watched his expression transform from annoyance to disbelief, and finally to poorly concealed anger. This can't be right, he muttered, flipping back to the first page, then forward again. We own this house, you signed it over to us. I did, I agreed calmly. And yet, according to that legally binding document, I have the right to live here for the remainder of my natural life. It seems we have what the lawyers call a life estate. Derek's face had turned an interesting shade of red. You tricked us. No, Derek, I protected myself, on the advice of counsel. There's a difference. I reclaimed the deed and returned it to my purse. So it seems we have 3 options. I can continue living here as we originally agreed. You can buy out my life estate for a fair market value, which would allow me to purchase a home like the one I just showed you. Or we can let the courts decide what's fair. What would you prefer? He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. I need to talk to Abby about this. Of course, I replied. Take all the time you need. I've lived here for 35 years. I'm not going anywhere. As he stormed out of the kitchen, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I had stood my ground. I wasn't being unreasonable or vindictive. I was simply refusing to be pushed aside. Later that day, I met Hector at the community center, where he was setting up for his chess class. How did it go? He asked, arranging pieces on the boards. I told him about my conversation with Derek, still surprised at my own boldness. Hector nodded approvingly. It's not about the house itself, you know. It's about respect. Exactly, I agreed. I gave them that house out of love, not obligation. The least they could do is acknowledge that. So, what will you do now? Stay and fight for your place or take a settlement and start fresh? I paused, considering the question seriously for the first time. I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to stay, just to prove that I can. But another part wonders if that's the best environment for any of us, especially Noah. Sometimes, Hector said thoughtfully, standing your ground means knowing when to move to higher ground. His words resonated with me. In my determination to maintain the status quo, to keep my daughter geographically close, had I overlooked other possibilities for myself? Had I been clinging to the past, to Tom's memory, to Abby's childhood, at the expense of my own future? As I helped him set up the last chessboard, I noticed a flyer on the bulletin board advertising an upcoming trip to Silver Lake, the vacation spot where Tom and I had taken Abby every summer until she was 12. Do you go on these center trips? I asked Hector. He shrugged. Sometimes. It depends on who's going and where they're headed. Why? Are you interested in this one? I studied the flyer more closely. 3 days at Silver Lake Lodge, hiking, canoeing, evening campfires. Activities I hadn't enjoyed in years because I'd been so focused on being available for Abby and Noah. Maybe I am, I said slowly. Maybe it's time I started doing things for myself again. That evening, I registered for the Silver Lake trip, wrote out a detailed list of what I believed would be fair compensation for my life estate, and waited for Abby and Derek to approach me. I wouldn't force the conversation, but I wouldn't avoid it either. 2 days later, Abby found me in the garden, tending to Tom's rose bushes. She sat on the bench beside me, her expression troubled. Derek told me about the deed, she began, her voice hesitant. About the life estate clause. I continued pruning, keeping my hands busy. Yes, I imagine he did. Why didn't you tell us about it before? I set down my shears and turned to face her directly. Would it have changed anything? You and Derek? Wanted the house. I wanted to give it to you. The life estate was just protection for me, which, as it turns out, I needed. Tears welled in her eyes. I never wanted to kick you out, Mom. That was all Derek's idea. He said the house was too crowded, that we needed our own space. And what did you say? I asked gently. She looked down, guilt written across her features. I didn't say enough, obviously. I should have stood up for you more. Yes, I agreed. You should have. But I should have stood up for myself too, long before now. We've both been avoiding difficult conversations. Abby wiped her eyes. So, what happens now? Are you going to make us sell the house? I reached for her hand. No, sweetie. I'm not going to make you do anything. But I am going to insist on being treated with respect, whether I continue living here or not. You're thinking of leaving? She sounded surprised, even hurt. I'm considering all my options, I told her honestly, including ones that might be better for everyone involved. She squeezed my hand. I don't want you to go, Mom. Noah would be devastated. I smiled sadly. Noah would adjust, just like children always do. The question is whether staying would be healthy for any of us at this point. We talked for nearly 2 hours in the garden that afternoon, more honestly than we had in years. Abby admitted that she'd felt caught between her husband and her mother, afraid of disappointing either of us. I confessed that I'd used the house as a way to keep her close when I should have been encouraging her independence. Derek wants to make you an offer, she said eventually, for your life estate. He's been researching comparable properties. I'm sure he has, I replied, unsurprised. I have some thoughts on that too. By the time we went inside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard Tom and I had landscaped together so many years ago. I felt a pang of nostalgia, but also a surprising lightness. Whether I stayed or left, I had reclaimed my voice in this home. That night, as I prepared for bed, I noticed how the moonlight filtered through the curtains, the same curtains Derek had once suggested replacing. They were outdated, certainly, but they were also mine. They were part of the life I had built. I fell asleep thinking about Silver Lake, about the possibility of new adventures, and about what it might feel like to live somewhere that was truly my own again, with no one to accommodate but myself. The next morning, I awoke to find a folder slipped under my door. Inside was a formal offer from Derek for my life estate, along with listings for several properties he thought might interest me. The amount was less than what I had calculated as fair, but more than I had expected from his initial reaction. Progress, at least. A starting point for negotiations. As I reviewed the materials over breakfast, Noah wandered into the kitchen. Still in his pajamas, his hair adorably mussed from sleep. Grandma, he said through a yawn, can we make pancakes? Of course, sweetie. I pulled out the mixing bowl, the same one I'd used to make pancakes with Abby when she was his age. Want to help? As we mixed batter and flipped pancakes together, I realized that these moments of connection was what mattered, not the walls around us. Whether I lived in this house or another, I would still be Noah's grandmother. I would still have the relationships that defined me. Later, as Noah happily devoured his third pancake, Abby and Derek joined us in the kitchen. Derek's expression was guarded but not hostile. Good morning, I greeted them both. There's plenty of batter left if you're hungry. Actually, Derek said, clearing his throat, I was hoping we could discuss the proposal I left for you. I nodded, setting down my coffee cup. Yes, we should talk about that, but not right now. I gestured toward Noah. Some discussions are better had in private. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but thought better of it. Fine. This evening, then? Perfect, I agreed. That will give me time to prepare my counter-proposal. His eyebrows rose slightly, but he said nothing more. After breakfast, I took Noah to the park, savoring the simple joy of pushing him on the swings and watching him navigate the monkey bars with increasing confidence. These were the moments I would miss if I moved away, but perhaps distance would make our time together even more precious, more intentional. When we returned home, I spent the afternoon carefully crafting my response to Derek's offer. I included my own calculations for the value of my life estate, details of the type of home I would require, and a proposed timeline for my transition. I was just finishing when my phone rang. It was Hector from the community center. "Just checking in," he said when I answered. "How are the negotiations going?" I filled him in on the developments, feeling a surge of gratitude for his support during this challenging time. "Sounds like you're standing your ground," he observed approvingly. "Are you still coming on the Silver Lake trip next weekend?" "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I've already packed my hiking boots." "Good for you," he said warmly. "Sometimes the best way forward is to step away for a bit, gain some perspective." As I hung up, I realized he was right. The trip couldn't have come at a better time. It would give me space to think, to reconnect with a place that held happy memories, and to imagine new possibilities for myself. That evening, I sat across from Derek and Abby at the dining room table, my counter-proposal neatly organized in a folder before me. The negotiations were civil but intense, with Derek pushing for a lower price and a quicker timeline, while I held firm on my requirements. "This isn't just about money," I explained when Derek questioned why my figure was significantly higher than his. "It's about ensuring I can maintain my quality of life and independence." "But the value you're assigning to the life estate seems arbitrary," he argued. "Not at all," I countered, pointing to my calculations. "It's based on standard actuarial tables for someone my age, the current market value of the house, and the cost of comparable housing in this area." Samantha helped me work it all out. At the mention of my lawyer, Derek's expression tightened. He hadn't expected me to have professional guidance, clearly assuming I would accept whatever he offered out of gratitude or obligation. After an hour of back and forth, we reached a tentative agreement, a sum that would allow me to purchase a smaller home in a neighborhood I liked, plus additional funds to cover moving expenses and new furnishings. In exchange, I would formally relinquish my life estate and move out within 3 months. "I'll have Samantha draw up the paperwork," I said as we concluded. "And Derek, I expect this negotiation to remain professional. No more changing locks or tossing my belongings into the rain." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "That won't happen." As they left the dining room, Abby lingered behind, her expression troubled. "Are you sure about this, Mom? It feels wrong somehow buying you out of your own home." I took her hand. "It's not my home anymore, sweetie. It's yours. And yes, I'm sure. This could be a fresh start for all of us." That night, I walked through the house one last time, not in sadness, but in appreciation. Each room held memories, some joyful, some painful, all part of the tapestry of my life. But they were just rooms. The memories would come with me wherever I went. As I passed Noah's bedroom, I peered in to find him still awake, reading a comic book by flashlight under his covers. He quickly turned it off when he saw me. "Busted," I whispered with a smile, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Can't sleep?" He shook his head. "Daddy said you might be moving to a new house. Is that true?" "I'm thinking about it," I admitted. "How would you feel about that?" He considered the question seriously. "Will you be far away? Can I still see you?" "Not far at all," I assured him, "and you can visit me anytime. Maybe you could even have your own special sleepover room." His eyes lit up at that prospect. "With bunk beds?" I laughed. "We'll see. Now get some sleep, mister." As I closed his door, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. This wasn't an ending, but a transition. I wasn't losing my family. I was redefining our relationships on healthier terms. The next morning, I woke early and drove to Silver Lake. Although the community center trip wasn't until the following weekend, I felt an urgent need to reconnect with this place that had meant so much to our family. The lake was quiet at this hour, mist rising from its surface as the sun began to warm the day. I sat on a familiar dock, watching a pair of loons glide across the water, their haunting calls echoing across the stillness. This is where Tom had taught Abby to swim, where we'd roasted marshmallows and told ghost stories, where we'd created some of our happiest memories as a family, but it was also where I'd come alone after his funeral, seeking solace in the natural beauty he'd loved so much. As the morning progressed, I walked the hiking trail around the lake, stopping at viewpoints to admire the scenery. At one overlook, I struck up a conversation with another early riser, a woman about my age who introduced herself as Margaret. "Do you come here often?" she asked as we both paused to catch our breath. "I used to," I replied. "It was our family vacation spot for many years. I'm just rediscovering it now." We walked together for the remainder of the trail, sharing stories and discovering a mutual love of gardening and mystery novels. When we reached the parking lot, she mentioned that she lived in a small community of cabins and cottages on the northwest side of the lake. "Several of us are year-round residents," she explained. "It's a wonderful place to live, peaceful but not isolated. There's actually a cottage for sale right now if you're interested." I smiled at the coincidence. "I might be, actually. I'm in the market for a new home." She wrote down the information for me, along with her phone number. "Call me if you want a neighbor's perspective on the place, or if you just want to continue our conversation sometime." As I drove home that afternoon, my mind was buzzing with new possibilities. A cottage at Silver Lake? It was further from Abby and Noah than I'd planned, about a 45-minute drive, but the idea was undeniably appealing. That evening, I called Samantha to discuss the potential change to our negotiation strategy. "A property at Silver Lake might be more expensive than what we've agreed on with Derek," she warned. "Are you sure you want to reopen those discussions?" "I'm not sure of anything yet," I admitted, "but I'd like to at least look at the cottage before we finalize anything." The next day, I drove back to Silver Lake with a realtor. The cottage was smaller than my current bedroom in the Cedar Creek house, but it was charming. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, with a screened porch overlooking the lake and a small garden plot out back. As I stood on the porch, watching the sunlight dance across the water, I felt a sense of rightness that had been missing from my life for too long. This could be mine. Not something I shared with Derek and Abby, not something I clung to out of obligation or fear, but something entirely my own. Back in Cedar Creek, I revised my counterproposal to Derek, increasing the amount I would need for my life estate to cover the higher cost of the lakeside property. I expected resistance, perhaps even outrage, but to my surprise, he agreed almost immediately. "If that's what you want, Catherine," he said after reviewing the new figures, "we can make it work." I studied his face, suspicious of his sudden generosity. Why the change of heart? He hesitated, then admitted, "There's a development opportunity in this neighborhood. A builder is interested in several properties, including this one. If we sell in the next year, we could make a significant profit." Now it made sense. Derek wasn't being generous. He was being strategic. The house I had loved, that Tom and I had renovated room by room, might soon be demolished to make way for newer, larger homes. Strangely, the revelation didn't upset me as much as it might have a few months ago. The house was just a structure. The love and memories it contained couldn't be bulldozed away. "I see," I said simply. "In that case, I think we have a deal." 2 weeks later, I signed the papers relinquishing my life estate in exchange for a sum that would allow me to purchase the Silver Lake cottage outright, with enough left over for renovations and a modest emergency fund. As Samantha witnessed, "My signature?" she asked. "Are you sure this is what you want, Kathy?" I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in years. "It's exactly what I need." The next day, I placed a deposit on the cottage and began planning my move. Margaret, my new hiking acquaintance, put me in touch with local contractors who could help with the minor renovations I wanted to make before moving in. When I told Hector about my decision during our next volunteer shift, his face lit up with approval. Silver Lake? That sounds perfect for you. I think it will be, I agreed. It's close enough to visit Noah regularly, but far enough to establish my own life. And what about the community center? He asked. Will you still volunteer here? I hadn't considered that aspect of my move. I'll have to find something similar near Silver Lake, I suppose. I'll miss working with you, though. He smiled mysteriously. Don't be too sure about that. I have a cabin on the east side of Silver Lake that I use most weekends. Perhaps our paths will continue to cross. The revelation surprised and pleased me. Another connection that wouldn't be severed by my move. Another possibility for my new life. As my final weeks in the Cedar Creek house approached, I found myself not sad, but nostalgic, taking time to properly say goodbye to the home that had sheltered so much of my life. I took photos of rooms before packing them up, preserving the memories without needing to preserve the space itself. Noah helped me pack, asking questions about each item, allowing me to share stories about his grandfather, about his mother's childhood, about the history of our family. In a way, the process of leaving became a gift, an opportunity to pass down these narratives to the next generation. Abby, too, seemed to appreciate these final weeks together in the house, often joining us for dinners or helping me sort through belongings. There was a new openness between us, as if the conflict over the house had finally broken down walls we hadn't even recognized were there. I'm sorry it came to this, Mom, she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on the back patio. I should have handled things differently. We all should have, I acknowledged. But sometimes it takes a crisis to show us what we really need. And what do you need? She asked quietly. I considered the question, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. I needed to remember who I am outside of being your mother. I needed to find my own path forward. The day I signed the papers for the Silver Lake cottage, I felt a strange mixture of emotions washing over me. There was excitement about this new chapter, relief at having resolved the conflict with Derek, and a bittersweet nostalgia as I prepared to leave the Cedar Creek house behind. The cottage needed some work, new plumbing, updated electrical wiring, fresh paint throughout, but the location was perfect. Perched on a small hill overlooking the northern shore of the lake, it offered breathtaking views of the water and the mountains beyond. The previous owner had been an avid gardener, and though the flower beds had grown wild with neglect, I could see the potential beneath the overgrown tangle of greenery. It's a real gem, Margaret said when she came to welcome me after I'd closed on the property. We stood on the screened porch, watching the late afternoon sunlight glitter across the lake's surface. Once you clear away some of that underbrush, you'll have one of the best views on the lake. I can't wait to get started, I replied, surprising myself with my enthusiasm. After decades of compromise and accommodation, the thought of making decisions based solely on my own preferences felt almost decadent. Margaret handed me a small potted plant, a peace lily with glossy green leaves. A housewarming gift, she explained. They're nearly impossible to kill, which makes them perfect. During the chaos of moving, thank you. I accepted the plant gratefully. It's been a while since I've had to start over like this. The best adventures often begin that way, she replied with a knowing smile. Starting over isn't always a bad thing, Kathy. As I drove back to Cedar Creek that evening, I found myself mulling over her words. Starting over. At 63, most people were settling into established routines, not embarking on new beginnings. And yet, here I was, preparing to leave the home. I'd lived in for 35 years to build a life in a lakeside cottage that was smaller than my current master bedroom. When I pulled into the driveway of the Cedar Creek house, I noticed Derek's car was gone, but Abby's was there. I found her in the kitchen, feeding Noah dinner. "Grandma!" Noah exclaimed when he saw me, his face lighting up. "Did you buy the lake house? Can I come swim there? Will there be frogs?" "Dad says there's always frogs at lakes." I laughed, ruffling his hair. "Yes, I bought it. And yes, you can come swim there. And I'm sure there will be plenty of frogs for you to chase. But not to bring inside," Abby added firmly, giving him a pointed look that suggested this rule had been established through previous experience. Noah's expression turned innocent. "I would never." "Mm-hmm," Abby murmured, clearly unconvinced. To me, she asked, "So it's official? You're moving to Silver Lake?" I nodded, setting my purse down on the counter. "I signed the papers today. The contractors start work next week, and if all goes according to plan, I should be able to move in about a month." "A month," she repeated softly. "That's so soon." "It's more than enough time to pack up my things," I replied, not wanting to acknowledge the hint of sadness in her voice. After all, wasn't this what she and Derek had wanted? Me out of their house? Out of their way? "I know, it's just—" She trailed off, busying herself with wiping spaghetti sauce from Noah's face. "It'll be strange not having you here." I felt a familiar twinge of guilt, the automatic response of a mother who's spent her life prioritizing her child's feelings over her own, but I pushed it aside. "You'll still see me regularly, and Noah can come for weekends once I'm settled." "Really?" Noah's eyes widened with excitement. "Sleepovers at Grandma's lake house?" "We'll see," Abby said, her tone non-committal. "It's a long drive, and you have soccer on Saturdays." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that I no longer needed to justify my decisions or negotiate for time with my grandson. This was precisely what I was moving away from, the constant subtle undermining, the passive-aggressive control. "Well, the invitation stands whenever it works for your schedule," I said lightly. "Now, who wants to help me start packing up my craft supplies? I have a box of chocolate chip cookies that needs taste testers." Noah immediately volunteered, as I knew he would, and the moment of tension passed. But as we sorted through balls of yarn and half-completed projects, I couldn't shake the feeling that Abby was already creating barriers, already finding reasons why visiting Grandma's new home would be too difficult. The next few weeks passed, in a flurry of activity. I hired a moving company, sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, and made multiple trips to donation centers with items I no longer needed. It was exhausting, but also oddly liberating. Each object I discarded or gave away seemed to lighten my spirit as well as my load. During this time, Derek maintained a polite distance. He was cordial when we crossed paths, but mostly stayed out of my way, as if afraid I might change my mind about moving if he reminded me why I was leaving. Abby, on the other hand, became increasingly emotional as my departure date approached. "Are you sure you'll be okay out there alone?" she asked, one evening as we packed up the last of my books. "Silver Lake is pretty isolated, especially during the off-season." "I won't be alone," I assured her. "There's quite a community of year-round residents. Margaret has already invited me to join their book club." "Margaret," Abby repeated, a chowy hint of jealousy in her voice that caught me by surprise. "Your new best friend." I set down the book I was holding and turned to face her directly. "Abby, what's really bothering you? For months, you and Derek have been pushing me to move out. Now that I'm doing exactly that, and doing it in a way that makes me happy, you seem upset." She sat down heavily on the edge of my bed, pushing aside a stack of packing materials. "I don't know," she admitted after a long pause. "I guess I didn't expect you to go so far or to seem so excited about leaving." "I'm excited about starting something new," I clarified. "That's different from being excited about leaving you and Noah." "Is it?" Her voice was small, almost childlike. "Sometimes it feels like you can't wait to get away from us." I sighed. sitting beside her on the bed. "Sweetheart, I gave you and Derek this house because I wanted you to have a secure place to raise Noah. I agreed to move out because that seemed to be what would make you both happy. I'm choosing Silver Lake because it's a place where I can be happy too. That's all there is to it." "I know," she said, leaning her head against my shoulder. "I'm being selfish." "No," I corrected her gently. "You're being human. Change is hard, even when it's change we think we want." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging between us. Finally, Abby straightened up and reached for another empty box. "Let's finish packing these books. And maybe you should keep a shelf free at the cottage for some of Noah's favorites, for when he comes to visit." I smiled, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "I think that's a wonderful idea." The next day, I received a call from the contractor working on the cottage. "Mrs. Reynolds, we've run into a bit of an issue with the plumbing. The pipes are older than we thought, and we're going to need to replace more of the system than we initially estimated." I closed my eyes, already anticipating the impact on my budget. "How much more?" He named a figure that made my stomach clench. It wasn't catastrophic. I had set aside a contingency fund for unexpected expenses, but it would definitely eat into my cushion. "Do we have any alternatives?" I asked, trying to keep the worry from my voice. "We could patch it up." "Temporarily," he offered, but honestly, that would just be delaying the inevitable. These old cottages, the plumbing is always the first thing to go. I thought about my options. I could dip into my emergency savings, but that felt risky at my age. I could see if the seller would be willing to contribute to the repairs, but I suspected that was a long shot given that I'd already closed on the property. Or I could? No. I wouldn't ask Derek and Abby for more money. The settlement amount had been fair, and I had signed the agreement. Going back to them now would undermine everything I was trying to prove, that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need their charity. "Go ahead with the full replacement," I instructed the contractor. "Just try to keep any other surprises to a minimum, please." After hanging up, I sat at my desk and recalculated my budget. The plumbing issue would stretch my finances tight, but it was manageable if I was careful with my other renovation choices. Perhaps I could refinish the existing kitchen cabinets instead of replacing them. Maybe the bathroom counter could wait until next year. As I adjusted figures in my spreadsheet, I was interrupted by a knock at my bedroom door. It was Derek, an unusual occurrence given his recent habit of avoiding me. "Catherine, do you have a moment?" he asked, hovering awkwardly in the doorway. "Of course," I replied, closing my laptop. "What can I do for you?" He stepped into the room, glancing around at the half-packed boxes with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I wanted to discuss something with you before you leave." "I'm listening." He took a deep breath, as if gathering his courage. "I've been thinking about the property development opportunity I mentioned, the one that involves potentially selling this house." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "The thing is," he said, "the developer is very interested in several properties on this block, including this one. But they want to move quickly. They're offering above market value if we can close within the next 6 months." "I see," I replied carefully. "And you're telling me this because it would mean tearing down this house," he admitted, "completely demolishing it to make room for a new development. And I wanted to make sure you were okay with that before we committed to anything." I stared at him, genuinely surprised. "You're asking for my permission? The house is legally yours now, Derek. You and Abby can do whatever you want with it." "Legally, yes," he acknowledged. "But ethically? This was your home for decades. You raised Abby here. It feels wrong to make this decision without at least talking to you first." For the first time since I'd known him, Derek appeared genuinely uncomfortable, even vulnerable. It was so out of character that I found myself momentarily speechless. Let me understand, I said finally. You're planning to sell the house to developers who will tear it down, and you want my blessing? He winced slightly at my blunt summary, but nodded. Essentially, yes. I could have made this difficult for him. Part of me wanted to. The part that still resented how he had pushed me out, how he had treated me as an inconvenience rather than family. But as I looked at him standing there, awaiting my judgment, I realized that his asking represented a significant shift. He was acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, that my connection to this house mattered. The house is just a structure. Derek, I said finally, the memories aren't in the walls or the floors. They're in here. I tapped my temple. Do what makes sense for your family's future. You don't need my permission. Relief washed over his features. Thank you, Catherine. That means a lot. As he turned to leave, I added, But Derek, I would appreciate it if you'd let me know before the demolition. I might want to come by one last time to say goodbye properly. He nodded. Of course. And Catherine, I'm sorry about how things unfolded. I could have handled everything better. It wasn't exactly the full apology I might have hoped for, but coming from Derek, it was significant. Yes, you could have, I agreed. But so could I. After he left, I sat alone in my half-packed room, thinking about the house's eventual fate. The idea of it being demolished should have been painful, yet I felt strangely peaceful. Perhaps because I had already begun the process of letting go, of separating my identity and my future from this physical space. The next morning, I received a surprise visit from Hector. He arrived at the front door with a paper bag of fresh pastries and coffee, looking slightly out of place in the suburban setting. I thought you might need sustenance for all this packing, he explained as I invited him in. Moving is hungry work. That's very thoughtful, I said, leading him to the kitchen. Though I'm not sure I have clean mugs left for that coffee. I packed most of them yesterday. He grinned, pulling 2 travel mugs from his jacket pockets. I came prepared. As we sat at the kitchen counter, sharing almond croissants and coffee, Hector updated me on the latest community center news and asked about my progress with the cottage renovations. The plumbing is going to cost more than I expected, I admitted. I might have to scale back some of my other plans. Plumbing issues are the worst, he sympathized. Invisible but essential, like so many things in life. Exactly, I agreed. I'd much rather spend the money on something I can actually see and enjoy, like new flooring or paint. Speaking of things you can see and enjoy, Hector said, reaching into his pocket. I have something for you. He placed a small envelope on the counter between us. Curious, I opened it to find a gift certificate for a local garden center near Silver Lake. Hector, this is too generous. He waved away my protest. It's selfish, actually. My cabin has a perfect view of your cottage from across the lake. I'm just ensuring I have something pleasant to look at. I laughed, touched by the gesture. Well, when you put it that way, I suppose I'm obligated to create something spectacular. I have no doubt you will, he replied with a warmth that made me momentarily flustered. After Hector left, I continued packing with renewed energy. The gift certificate had reminded me of one of the aspects I was most looking forward to at the cottage, the opportunity to create a garden from scratch, to plant flowers and shrubs chosen solely for my own enjoyment, rather than maintaining what already existed. That afternoon, I tackled the attic, a space I'd been avoiding because I knew it contained some of the most emotionally charged items, boxes of Abby's childhood mementos, Tom's old clothes that I'd never been able to donate, holiday decorations we'd collected over the years. As I sorted through dusty containers, I found myself making different piles, things to keep at the cottage, things to offer to Abby, things to finally let go. It was painstaking work, each item requiring its own decision, its own moment of consideration. In one corner, partially hidden beneath an old quilt, I discovered a box I didn't immediately recognize. When I opened it, I found dozens of letters bound with faded ribbons, the correspondence between Tom and me during the year we'd been separated before our engagement, when he'd been completing his medical residency in Chicago and I'd been finishing my teaching degree in Boston. I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light, and began to read the letters one by one. Tom's handwriting, so familiar yet now so precious in its rarity, filled page after page with observations about his training, questions about my studies, and declarations of love that ranged from sweetly awkward to breathtakingly poetic. One passage in particular caught my attention. I walked by Lake Michigan today and thought of you. There's something about bodies of water that always makes me feel closer to you, even with all these miles between us. Maybe it's because water connects everything eventually. Every lake, every river ultimately flows to the same oceans. So when I touch this water, I'm somehow connected to the water near you. It's a silly thought, perhaps, but it comforts me on days when I miss you most desperately. Tears pricked my eyes as I realized the unintentional symmetry. Here I was, preparing to move to a lakeside cottage, and Tom had found comfort in a lake during our separation. Had some subconscious memory of his words guided me toward Silver Lake? Or was it simply coincidence? One of those meaningless patterns humans are so prone to imposing on random events. Either way, finding the letters felt significant, a gift, from my past self to my present one. I carefully retied the ribbons and placed the box in my keep pile. These would come with me to the cottage, a tangible reminder of the love that had shaped so much of my life. When I finally emerged from the attic hours later, dusty and emotionally drained, I found Abby sitting at the kitchen table, looking troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked, setting down my box of keepsakes. She glanced up, momentarily distracted from her thoughts. "Oh, nothing. Just work stuff." I knew my daughter well enough to recognize when she was being evasive. "Abby," she sighed, relenting. "Derek told me he talked to you about selling the house to the developers." "He did," I confirmed, pouring myself a glass of water. The attic had been hot and dry. "And you're really okay with it? With them tearing down your home?" I considered her question carefully. "I'm okay with you and Derek making whatever decision is best for your family. If selling to the developers makes financial sense, then you should do it." "But this house means so much to you," she pressed. "All those memories of Dad, of my childhood." "The memories aren't in the physical structure," I repeated what I'd told Derek. "Besides, I'm taking plenty of tangible reminders with me." I gestured to the box I'd just brought down. "Look what I found in the attic. All the letters. Your father and I wrote to each other the year before we got engaged." Her expression softened. "Really? Can I read them?" "Some of them," I said with a smile. "Others are a bit too personal." She laughed, the tension momentarily broken. "Fair enough. I'm not sure I want to read my parents' love letters anyway." I sat down across from her. "Abby, what's really bothering you about selling the house? Is it concern for me? Or is it something else?" She traced a pattern on the tabletop with her finger, avoiding my gaze. "I guess I hate the idea of strangers living here, even before the demolition. And once they tear it down, there will be nothing left of our history here." "You could take pictures," I suggested gently. "Document every room, every detail you want to remember. And perhaps save a few physical pieces, the carved newel post, from the staircase, the stained glass window in the upstairs bathroom. Things you could incorporate into your next home." "Our next home," she repeated quietly. "That's another thing. Derek is talking about using the money from the sale to move to Phoenix, after all. He says with the housing market there, we could afford something much larger." Ah, now we were getting to the heart of the matter. "And you don't want to move to Phoenix?" She shook her head. "My job is here. Noah's school, our friends. Everything is here? But Derek says it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The development company he's been talking to has connections in Phoenix. Potential clients waiting. I felt a familiar sinking sensation in my stomach. History seemed to be repeating itself. Derek making unilateral decisions about their future. Abby feeling pressured to agree. "What do you want, Abby?" I asked directly. She looked startled by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly that. Setting aside Derek's preferences, what do you want? If you could make this decision solely based on your own desires, what would you choose?" She blinked rapidly, as if the concept was entirely foreign to her. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it that way." "Perhaps you should," I suggested, "before you agree to uproot your entire life." "But couples are supposed to compromise," she argued weakly. "Marriage is about give and take." "Yes," I agreed, "but compromise means both people adjust their expectations, not one person consistently giving in to the other's demands. Your father and I compromised plenty, but we always made major life decisions together, as equals." She fell silent, absorbing my words. Finally, she asked in a small voice, "How do I even start that conversation with Derek? He's already so excited about Phoenix." "You start by knowing what you want," I said firmly. "You can't negotiate effectively if you don't know your own bottom line." As I watched her struggling with this concept, the idea that her preferences deserved equal weight in their marriage, I realized how much my own behavior might have influenced her. Had my years of accommodation, of prioritizing family harmony, over my own needs, taught her that a woman's role was to adapt, to bend, to make things work at any personal cost? The thought was deeply uncomfortable. I had always prided myself on being a strong role model for my daughter, but perhaps my strength had been most visible in endurance rather than self-advocacy. "Mom," Abby said, interrupting my self-reflection, "I don't want you to move so far away, especially if there's a chance we might end up in Phoenix." "Silver Lake is only 45 minutes from here," I reminded her. "And Phoenix is just a plane ride away. We'll make it work, sweetheart." "But it won't be the same," she insisted. "We won't be able to just drop by for dinner or have you pick up Noah from school when we're running late." "No," I acknowledged. "It won't be the same, but different doesn't have to mean worse. Maybe having some distance will help us appreciate the time we do spend together even more." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue further. After a moment, she stood up and straightened her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of Tom that it made my heart ache. "I should go check on Noah. He's supposed to be doing his homework, but he's probably built a fort out of his textbooks instead." After she left, I remained at the kitchen table, thinking about our conversation. My relationship with Abby was shifting, evolving from the straightforward mother-daughter dynamic of her childhood into something more complex. I was becoming a separate person to her, someone with my own life and choices, rather than simply an extension of her family unit. It was a necessary transition, but not an easy one. The next week passed in a blur of practical tasks, finalizing arrangements with the moving company, transferring utilities, setting up mail forwarding. I made several trips to Silver Lake to check on the renovation progress and began acquainting myself with my new neighborhood. Margaret introduced me to several other year-round residents, including a retired professor who lived 3 cottages down from mine, and a couple who had converted an old boathouse into a stunning modern home. "Everyone's very friendly here," I told Hector when we met for coffee at a cafe midway between Cedar Creek and Silver Lake. "It's almost like a small village." "That's what I love about it," he agreed. "Close-knit but not claustrophobic. People look out for each other without being intrusive." "A delicate balance," I observed. "Indeed. Speaking of balance, how are things with your daughter? Any more discussions about Phoenix?" I sighed, stirring my latte absently. "Not that she's mentioned to me. I'm trying not to push, to let her work through it in her own way." "Wise," he commented, though sometimes people need a little nudge to stand up for themselves. The nudge I gave her was suggesting she figure out what she actually wants. I replied. That seemed revolutionary enough for one conversation. Hector chuckled. Fair enough. Change takes time, especially when it involves long-established patterns. Speaking of change, I said, eager to shift the subject away from Abby's marital dynamics. The contractor thinks the cottage will be ready for me to move in next week. The plumbing is finally fixed, and they're finishing up the electrical work. Now. That's wonderful news, Hector said, his expression brightening. We should celebrate once you're settled. Perhaps a housewarming dinner? I make an excellent paella. That sounds lovely, I agreed, feeling a flutter of anticipation that I quickly attributed to excitement about the move. Back at the Cedar Creek house, my packing was nearly complete. Most of the rooms were empty now, with just the essential furniture remaining. The space echoed in a way it never had before, as if it was already preparing for its new occupants, or perhaps for its eventual demolition. One evening, as I was labeling the final boxes in the garage, Derek appeared in the doorway. His expression was uncharacteristically hesitant. Catherine, may I speak with you for a moment? I set down my marker. Of course. He stepped into the garage, hands in his pockets. I wanted to let you know that Abby and I have been talking about the Phoenix opportunity. Oh? I kept my tone neutral, not wanting to reveal that Abby had already shared her concerns with me. Yes, and we've decided that the timing isn't right. We're going to stay in Cedar Creek, at least for the next few years. I couldn't hide my surprise. That's quite a change from what you were considering before. He nodded, an odd mix of emotions crossing his face. Abby made some compelling points about Noah's education and her career. And frankly, after our conversation about the house, I've been doing some thinking of my own. What kind of thinking? I asked, genuinely curious about this new, more reflective Derek. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation but determined to continue, about how I sometimes push for what I want without fully considering other perspectives, about how I can be inflexible. I bit back the urge to agree emphatically. Self-awareness is valuable, I said instead. Anyway, he continued, we are still planning to sell to the developers, but we'll be looking for a new home in this area rather than relocating. I think that's a wise decision, I replied. Noah will benefit from the stability. Derek nodded, then added with visible effort. And it means you won't be quite so far from Abby and Noah. I know that's important to all of you. The acknowledgement, simple as it was, felt significant. Thank you, Derek. That means a lot to me. He cleared his throat, clearly reaching the limit of his comfort with emotional conversation. Well, I'll let you get back to your packing. Let us know if you need any help with the final move. After he left, I sat among my boxes, reflecting on the unexpected turn our family dynamics had taken. Derek, showing consideration for others' feelings. Abby, apparently standing up for her preferences. Me, creating a new life independent of them both. It wasn't what any of us had anticipated a few months ago, but perhaps it was exactly what we all needed. The day before my scheduled move, I walked through the empty house one final time. Each room held echoes of the life I'd lived there. Tom and I bringing newborn Abby home, birthday parties in the dining room, quiet evenings reading by the living room fireplace, thunderstorms watched from the front porch swing. In my old bedroom, now stripped of all personal touches, I paused by the window that overlooked the backyard. The rose bushes Tom and I had planted 3 decades ago were blooming, their pink and yellow blossoms bright against the green lawn. I had taken cuttings from several of them, hoping to propagate them at the cottage. A small piece of our shared past to bring into my new future. Mom? Abby's voice came from the doorway. The moving truck is here. I turned away from the window, ready to embrace whatever came next. I'm coming. As I stepped out of the bedroom, I glanced back one last time, not at the empty space itself, but at the woman I had been while living there. Wife, mother, caretaker. Those roles would always be part of me, but they would no longer define me completely. At Silver Lake, I would discover who else I could be. Goodbye, I whispered. Though whether to the house or to that former self, I wasn't entirely sure. Then I closed the door and walked toward my waiting family, toward the moving truck, toward the next chapter of my life. The drive to Silver Lake felt ceremonial somehow, my car packed with the last of my personal belongings, following the moving truck that carried the furniture and boxes I'd selected for my new home. Noah had insisted on riding with me to keep Grandma company, a gesture that filled my heart. "Will you have a boat at your lake house?" he asked as we wound along the road that curved through thick forests before opening up to lake vistas. "Dad says people who live on lakes have boats." "Not right away," I told him. "But maybe someday. Would you like that?" "Yes." His enthusiasm was contagious. We could go fishing and look for treasure. "Treasure?" I repeated, amused. "Dad says lakes sometimes have treasure at the bottom. Old coins and stuff from shipwrecks." I decided not to correct his understanding of maritime archaeology. "Well, Silver Lake isn't very deep, but we can certainly look." As we crested the final hill, the lake came into view, its surface glittering in the midday sun. "There it is," I said, feeling a surge of excitement. "My new home." Noah pressed his face against the window. "It's beautiful, Grandma." "Yes," I agreed, taking in the panoramic vista. "Yes, it is." When we pulled up to the cottage, I was surprised to see several people waiting on the porch. Margaret, the retired professor she'd introduced me to, and Hector, all holding welcome signs and a basket of what appeared to be local goods. "What's this?" I asked as I stepped out of the car. "A proper welcome to the neighborhood," Margaret explained, coming forward to hug me. "Everyone brings something useful for a new lake resident." I was touched by the gesture, this tangible demonstration of community. Abby and Derek arrived moments later, and together we all helped direct the movers, deciding which pieces should go where in the cottage's compact layout. By late afternoon, the bulk of the work was done. Furniture was in place, though boxes remained stacked in corners. Margaret and her friends had departed after extracting a promise that I'd attend the community potluck that weekend. Derek had taken Noah down to explore the shoreline, leaving Abby and me alone in what was now my kitchen. "It's smaller than I expected," she commented, looking around at the cozy space. "But perfect for one person," I replied, unpacking dishes into a cabinet. "And there's still plenty of room for visitors." She picked up a plate, turning it over in her hands. "These are new." "Yes," I confirmed. "I decided to leave the old set for you and Derek. These are more my style anyway." She nodded, setting down the plate carefully. "Mom, I just want you to know. Derek and I staying in Cedar Creek instead of moving to Phoenix, that was mostly my doing." "Oh." I kept my tone casual, not wanting to make too much of this admission. "After our conversation, I realized you were right. I needed to figure out what I wanted, not just go along with Derek's plans. So I made a list of pros and cons, researched job opportunities in Phoenix, and thought about what would be best for Noah." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "And then I presented my case to Derek like I was arguing in court." "And he listened," I observed. "He did," she confirmed, sounding slightly surprised still. "He really did. It wasn't easy. He had his heart set on Phoenix, but in the end, he agreed that staying makes more sense for our family right now." "I'm proud of you," I told her, meaning it deeply. Standing up for yourself isn't always easy, especially with someone as strong-willed as Derek. "I had a good teacher," she replied, giving me a meaningful look. even if it took me a while to learn the lesson. Before I could respond, Noah burst through the door, his sneakers muddy and his face alight with excitement. "Grandma, there's a family of ducks right by your dock, and Dad says there's a place where we can rent canoes. Can we go tomorrow, please?" I laughed at his enthusiasm. "We'll see. We've got a lot of unpacking to do first." "I'll help," he promised solemnly. "I'm very good at opening boxes." "Then I'm very lucky to have your assistance," I told him, ruffling his hair affectionately. As the evening progressed, we ordered pizza and ate it on the screened porch, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. Derek, who had been quiet for most of the day, finally spoke up. "You've got a beautiful spot here. Catherine, very peaceful." "Thank you," I replied, surprised by the genuine admiration in his voice. "I think I'm going to be very happy here." "I'm sure you will be," he said, and for once there was no trace of condescension in his tone. When they finally prepared to leave, Noah was reluctant to go. "Can I stay with Grandma tonight, please? I want to see the lake in the morning." "Not tonight, buddy," Derek told him firmly. "Grandma needs to settle in, but we'll come back soon." "Very soon," Abby emphasized, giving me a quick hug. "Call if you need anything, Mom. Anything at all." I assured them I would be fine and waved from the porch as their car disappeared down the lane. Then, for the first time, I was truly alone in my new home. The cottage felt different with everyone gone. Quieter, more I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented before remembering where I was. Silver Lake. My cottage. My new life. The realization brought a smile to my face as I stretched and got out of bed, eager to experience my first full day as a lake resident. The morning air was crisp and carried the scent of pine when I stepped onto the screened porch with my coffee. Mist hovered over the water's surface, giving the landscape an almost mystical quality. A loon called somewhere in the distance, its haunting cry echoing across the lake. I wrapped my hands around my warm mug and simply observed, absorbing the peaceful scene. This was what I had been missing in Cedar Creek without even realizing. Its space to breathe, to think, to simply exist without constantly accommodating others. The cottage was far from perfect. Boxes still needed unpacking, furniture arranging, pictures hanging. But it was mine in a way the Cedar Creek house hadn't been for years. After finishing my coffee, I changed into comfortable clothes and spent the morning organizing the kitchen and setting up my bedroom. Around noon, a knock at the door startled me from my task of lining shelves. "Just me," called Margaret's cheerful voice. "Thought you might need help unpacking, or a break from it." I opened the door to find her holding a picnic basket and wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat. "I vote for a break," I said, suddenly aware of how hungry I was. "I haven't stopped since sunrise." "Perfect timing, then. I've brought lunch, and I thought we might eat down by your dock. It's such a glorious dinyam." We carried the basket and a couple of folding chairs to the small wooden dock that extended from my property into the lake. Margaret had packed an impressive spread: homemade chicken salad sandwiches, fresh fruit, pasta salad, and slices of lemon pound cake. "This is wonderful," I said gratefully, biting into a sandwich. I didn't even realize how hungry I was until just now. "Moving is exhausting work," she replied, pouring iced tea from a thermos. "How are you settling in?" "Still figuring out where everything goes, but it already feels like home." I gestured toward the water. "How could it not with this view?" "That's what drew us all here," Margaret nodded. "There's something healing about being near water. At least that's what my husband used to say." "Used to?" I asked gently. "He passed 4 years ago, cancer." Her voice held old pain, well managed but still present. "We retired here together, had 5 wonderful years, and then—" She shrugged, a small, eloquent gesture. Life happens. I'm sorry, I said, thinking of Tom. My husband's been gone 12 years now. Heart attack. It never stops being strange, does it? Living without them. No, she agreed. But it gets different. Not easier exactly, but more familiar. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, two widows understanding each other without need for further words. Then Margaret brightened. So, you've met Hector? I felt a flush rise to my cheeks at her tone. Yes, we volunteered at the same community center in Cedar Creek. He's quite the catch, you know. Half the widows and divorcees at Silver Lake have tried their luck. Margaret, I protested, laughing. He's just a friend. Of course, she replied with exaggerated innocence. I'm just saying, if you were looking for more than friendship, you could do worse. He's kind, intelligent, still has all his hair. I'm not looking for anything, I insisted, though her words stirred something I hadn't considered before. I've been on my own for over a decade. I'm used to it. Being used to something doesn't mean it's what you want, she observed shrewdly. But I'll stop meddling, for now. We finished our lunch with lighter conversation about the lake community, who lived where, which local shops were best, when the seasonal residents typically arrived and departed. It was exactly the kind of practical information I needed, and I was grateful for Margaret's willingness to share it. After she left, I returned to unpacking with renewed energy. By evening, I had made significant progress, transforming the impersonal spaces into rooms that reflected my taste and personality. I hung Tom's favorite landscape painting in the living room, arranged my collection of novels on the built-in bookshelves, and placed my grandmother's antique clock on the mantel above the small fireplace. Just as I was debating whether to continue, working or call it a day, my phone rang. It was Abby. Mom, how's it going? We wanted to check in and see how your first day went. Wonderfully, I replied truthfully. Margaret brought lunch. I've unpacked most of the essentials, and the lake is even more beautiful than I remembered. That's great, she said, though I detected a hint of something, worry, wistfulness, in her voice. Noah wants to say goodnight. He's been talking about the ducks all day. Noah's excited voice came through the phone. Grandma, did you see the ducks today? Are they still there? Dad says maybe they have babies. I smiled at his enthusiasm. I haven't been down to check on them yet, but I'll look first thing tomorrow and give you a full report. Promise? He asked solemnly. Duck's honor, I replied, earning a giggle from him. After we hung up, I made myself a simple dinner and ate it on the porch, watching the sunset transform the lake once again. The colors were even more spectacular than the previous evening, deep purples and fiery oranges reflecting off the water's surface. As darkness fell, stars appeared, more numerous and brilliant than I could ever see in Cedar Creek with its streetlights and house lights. I sat long after my plate was empty, simply soaking in the peace and beauty of my new environment. A profound sense of contentment washed over me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt truly at ease, as if I had found exactly where I was meant to be. The next morning, true to my promise, I checked on the duck family before breakfast. They were indeed still there, a mother and 6 fuzzy ducklings paddling near the shore. I took several photos to send to Noah and spent a few minutes observing their synchronized movements across the water. As I turned to head back to the cottage, I spotted Hector walking along the shoreline path that connected several of the properties. He waved when he saw me, changing direction to approach my dock. Good morning, he called. Checking on the local wildlife? Fulfilling a promise to my grandson, I explained, showing him the duck photos on my phone. He was quite taken with them yesterday. Ah, the mallard family. They nest here every year, according to my neighbor. The mother always brings her ducklings to this same stretch of shoreline. He studied the photos approvingly. You've got a good eye for composition. Just lucky, I demurred. The subjects made it easy. He glanced at his watch. Are you free this evening? The sunset from my side of the lake offers a different perspective. I thought you might enjoy seeing it. Perhaps with dinner? I did promise you my paella. The invitation sent a flutter through my stomach that I resolutely ignored. That sounds lovely, thank you. Great. Shall we say 6:30? I'm in the cabin with the blue trim just around that point. He gestured to a wooded peninsula that jutted into the lake to the east of my property. I'll look forward to it, I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. After Hector continued on his way, I returned to the cottage and resumed my unpacking efforts. By midday, most of the boxes were empty, their contents finding new homes throughout the small space. I took a break to explore the overgrown garden, making mental notes about areas to clear first and plants worth salvaging. The previous owner had clearly been an enthusiastic but somewhat haphazard gardener. Perennial flowers grew alongside herbs and even some vegetables, with little apparent organization. But there was charm in the wildness, and many of the plants were healthy despite the neglect. With some pruning and reshaping, the garden could become something special. The garden shed, when I finally located it behind a tangle of blackberry bushes, was a pleasant surprise. Though dusty and cobwebbed, it contained a treasure trove of good quality tools, clay pots in various sizes, and even some seed packets that might still be viable. I spent an hour sorting through the contents, mentally planning my first gardening projects. By late afternoon, I was pleasantly tired and decided to take a break before preparing for dinner at Hector's. I showered, washing away the garden dirt, and then stood before my newly organized closet, facing an unexpected dilemma. What does one wear to a neighbor's dinner at a lake cabin? I finally settled on navy linen pants and a soft blue blouse that Tom had always said matched my eyes. Simple gold earrings and a touch of lipstick completed the look. Casual but put together. As I studied my reflection, I realized I was actually nervous, which seemed ridiculous. This wasn't a date. It was simply dinner with a friend. Following Hector's directions, I walked along the shoreline path rather than taking my car. The evening was mild, with just enough breeze to keep mosquitoes at bay. The path wound through trees and occasionally crossed private property, but Hector had assured me that lakeside residents were accustomed to neighbors passing through on the trail. His cabin came into view as I rounded the wooded point, a charming structure with weathered cedar siding and the promised blue trim. It was larger than my cottage, with a wraparound deck that offered panoramic lake views. Hector was on the deck when I arrived, tending to something on a portable burner. "Right on time," he called when he spotted me on the path. "Come on up. The paella is almost ready." The deck was comfortably furnished with Adirondack chairs, a small dining table already set for two, and container gardens overflowing with herbs and flowers. The promised view was indeed spectacular. From this angle, I could see the entire sweep of the lake, including my own cottage on the opposite shore. "This is breathtaking," I said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "One of the benefits of being on the west side of the lake," he agreed. "Sunset views every evening. Though I have to say, your position offers better sunrise vistas." "I noticed that this morning," I nodded, though I was too busy duck watching to fully appreciate it. Hector gestured to the table. "Shall we? It's best served hot." The paella was exquisite. Saffron-infused rice studded with plump shrimp, tender chunks of chicken, and colorful vegetables. He'd also prepared a simple green salad and warmed a loaf of crusty bread. "This is incredible," I said after my first bite. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother was Spanish," he explained. "She insisted all her children learn her family recipes. This one is generations old. She taught you well." As we ate, we talked easily about our respective days, the lake community, and our previous lives before retirement. I learned that Hector had practiced law for nearly 40 years, specializing in family law before retiring 5 years ago. It was rewarding work, he said, but also draining. Day after day of families in crisis, marriages disintegrating, custody battles. I reached a point where I needed something different. I can imagine, I replied. Teaching had its challenges too, but nothing like that. For me, it was more the physical toll, being on my feet all day, the constant energy required to manage a classroom of young children. Yet you volunteer with children at the community center, he observed. Different context, I explained. Volunteering a few hours a week with kids who want to be there is a joy. Teaching 30 first graders state-mandated curriculum 5 days a week is, well, a younger person's game. The conversation flowed smoothly through dinner and into dessert, a simple but perfect flan that Hector admitted was also his mother's recipe. As the sky darkened and stars appeared, we moved to the Adirondack chairs with fresh glasses of wine. So, Hector said after a comfortable silence, how are things with your daughter and son-in-law? Any more developments about selling the house? They're proceeding with the sale to the developers, I told him, but they've decided to stay in Cedar Creek rather than move to Phoenix. Interesting, he commented. Your daughter's decision? Partially, I acknowledged. She finally spoke up about what she wanted, and apparently Derek listened. It was a pleasant surprise. Sometimes people can surprise us, he said, his gaze thoughtful, if we give them the chance. True, I agreed, though I admit, with Derek, my expectations were pretty low. Hector chuckled. Understandably, given what you've told me about him. But people can change, especially when their circumstances change. Such as having their mother-in-law discover a life estate clause in the deed to their house? I suggested wryly. Exactly, he grinned. Nothing like a legal complication to adjust someone's perspective. We talked well into the evening, conversation gradually shifting from family dynamics to broader topics. Books we'd enjoyed, places we'd traveled, experiences that had shaped us. I found myself sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years, and listening with genuine interest to his. When I finally noticed the time, I was startled to see it was nearly midnight. I should go, I said reluctantly. It's gotten so late. Let me walk you back, Hector offered, rising from his chair. The path can be tricky in the dark. That's not necessary, I protested. I have a flashlight on my phone. I insist, he said firmly. Lake rule. No one walks the shoreline path alone after dark. I relented, secretly pleased by his insistence. We walked slowly, our way lit by the flashlight app on his phone and the nearly full moon overhead. The lake was silver in the moonlight, peaceful and still. Thank you for dinner, I said as we approached my cottage. It was wonderful. The company made it so, he replied. We'll have to do it again soon. Perhaps at your place next time? Once you're fully settled in. I'd like that, I agreed. At my door, there was a momentary awkwardness, the classic end-of-evening uncertainty. Hector solved it by taking my hand and squeezing it gently before releasing it. Good night, Kathy. Welcome to lake life. Good night, I replied, inexplicably flustered by the brief contact, and thank you again. Inside, I leaned against the closed door, feeling oddly breathless. What was happening to me? I was acting like a teenager after a first date, not a 63-year-old widow after dinner with a neighbor. It was ridiculous, and yet exhilarating. I went to bed that night with my mind full of the evening, the food, the conversation, the way Hector had looked at me when I'd laughed at one of his stories. I fell asleep smiling, looking forward to what tomorrow might bring in this new life I was creating. The next few weeks settled into a pleasant rhythm. My days were filled with small projects around the cottage, hanging curtains, arranging furniture, beginning the task of reclaiming the garden from its overgrown state. I joined Margaret's book club, which met every other Wednesday in various members' homes. and discovered the small but well-stocked library in the nearest town. Abby and Noah visited on weekends, sometimes with Derek, sometimes without. Noah was delighted by everything about the lake. The ducks, the small sandy beach area I'd cleared, the rowboat I'd purchased secondhand from a neighbor who was upgrading to a motorboat. "Can I sleep in the boat?" he asked one Saturday after Siey. We'd spent the afternoon rowing around the lake's perimeter. "In the boat?" I repeated, amused. "Wouldn't you be more comfortable in the guest room I set up for you?" "But the boat is more adventurous," he explained seriously. "Like camping, but on water." "I think that's called capsizing, buddy," Derek interjected. He had accompanied Abby and Noah this weekend, and to my surprise, had been pleasant company. He'd even helped me install a new ceiling fan in the living room, a task I'd been putting off. Noah looked so disappointed that I found myself suggesting a compromise. "How about we put the boat on the lawn and you can sleep in it there? All the adventure without the danger of falling into the lake." His face lit up. "Yes, can we, Dad? Please?" Derek exchanged a glance with me, then nodded. "All right, but only if you promise to actually sleep, not stay up all night counting stars or whatever scheme you're hatching." Later that evening, after we'd set up the boat with sleeping bags and pillows on the lawn, Derek joined me on the porch while Abby supervised Noah's bedtime preparations. "This place suits you," he observed, gesturing to the cottage and lake beyond. "You seem different here." "Different how?" I asked, curious about his perception. He considered for a moment. "More relaxed, more yourself, I guess. In Cedar Creek, you always seem to be trying to stay out of the way, to make yourself smaller somehow." His insight surprised me. I hadn't expected Derek, of all people, to notice such a thing. "That's remarkably perceptive," I admitted. He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm not completely oblivious, Catherine. I know I didn't always make things easy for you back at the house." "No," I agreed mildly. "You didn't." "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about that." The apology seemed to cost him something in pride, but it appeared genuine. "I was so focused on what I thought our family needed that I didn't really consider your perspective." I studied him, trying to reconcile this self-aware Derek with the dismissive, controlling man who had tried to push me into Oak Ridge Apartments. "What changed?" I asked finally. He glanced toward the lawn where Noah was now settled in the boat, Abby reading him a bedtime story by flashlight. "Partly seeing how excited Noah is about visiting you here. Partly realizing how much Abby values having you in her life, even if not under the same roof." He paused. "And partly just growing up, I guess. Recognizing that my way isn't always the only way, or even the best way." "That's a difficult lesson for anyone to learn," I acknowledged, thinking of my own journey to this realization. "But an important one." Derek nodded, seeming relieved that I'd accepted his apology without making him grovel. "So, who's the gentleman? In the blue-trimmed cabin?" he asked, changing the subject. "Margaret mentioned he's been spending a lot of time over here, helping with your garden." I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "Hector is a friend. We volunteered together at the community center in Cedar Creek." "Just a friend?" Derek asked, his tone lightly teasing. "Yes," I replied firmly, though even to my own ears, I didn't sound entirely convinced. "Just a friend." Derek wisely dropped the subject, but his knowing smile suggested he didn't entirely believe me. The truth was, I wasn't sure what to call my relationship with Hector anymore. We had fallen into a comfortable routine of shared dinners, walks along the lakeshore, and collaborative garden work. He had indeed been helping me reclaim the overgrown beds around my cottage, bringing cuttings from his own garden to fill gaps where weeds had been removed. We enjoyed each other's company immensely, that much was clear, but neither of us had made any move to define our relationship as anything beyond friendship. despite Margaret's none too subtle hints and the knowing glances from other lake residents when they saw us together. The next morning, I woke early to find Noah already up, sitting in the boat and watching the sunrise over the lake. I joined him, bringing hot chocolate for him and coffee for myself. "Did you sleep well, Captain?" I asked, passing him the mug of cocoa. "The best," he declared. "I'm going to be a sailor when I grow up. Or maybe someone who studies lakes. Is that a job?" "It is," I assured him. "They're called limnologists." He tested the word carefully. "Limnologist, I like it. Do they get to be on boats all day?" "Sometimes," I said. "They study everything about lakes, the water, the fish, the plants. It's very important work." He nodded seriously. "Then that's what I'll be. A limnologist. With a boat." As we sat together, watching the mist rise off the water, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Here was a connection that wouldn't have been possible in quite this way without my move to Silver Lake. Noah was experiencing nature, forming memories, discovering interests that might shape his future, all because I had created this space for us. Later that day, after Abby, Derek, and Noah had departed, promising to return the following weekend, I found myself alone on my porch, thinking about the changes in our family dynamics. The distance between Cedar Creek and Silver Lake, rather than diminishing my relationship with Abby and Noah, seemed to have enriched it somehow. Our time together felt more intentional, more focused on genuine connection rather than the routine interactions of people sharing space. Even Derek seemed transformed by the new arrangement. Without the daily friction of living under the same roof, we were finding ways to interact civilly, even warmly at times. It was as if removing the pressure of constant accommodation had allowed everyone to breathe more freely, to see each other more clearly. I was still contemplating these changes when Hector arrived, carrying a basket of freshly picked vegetables from his garden. "Surplus from my overly ambitious planting," he explained, setting the basket on the porch table. "I thought you might be able to use them." "They're beautiful," I said, examining the glossy eggplants, firm zucchini, and vibrant tomatoes. "Thank ya. You." "How was the family visit?" he asked, taking a seat beside me. "Wonderful," I replied. "Noah slept in the rowboat on the lawn and has decided to become a limnologist." Hector chuckled. Ambitious career plans for an 8-year-old. "It's this week's ambition," I agreed. Last week it was professional soccer player, and before that, astronaut. And Derek? How was he? I hesitated, still processing the unexpected conversation from the previous evening. Actually, he apologized for how he treated me at the Cedar Creek house. Hector's eyebrows rose. "That's surprising, isn't it?" He seemed genuinely reflective about it too, said he realized he'd been too focused on his own perspective. "People can surprise us," Hector repeated his sentiment from our dinner weeks ago, "if we give them the chance." "You said that before," I noted. "You must be an optimist about human nature." "I've seen too much in my legal career to be a pure optimist," he replied. "But I've also seen remarkable transformations. People who seemed irredeemable finding their way to better versions of themselves." He smiled. "Besides, Derek's self-reflection benefits you, doesn't it? Makes your relationship with your daughter and grandson smoother." "True," I acknowledged. "I'm just not used to thinking of Derek as someone capable of growth." "Perhaps that's the lesson for all of us," Hector suggested. "To resist fixing people in our minds as static characters, unchangeable and predictable. Everyone is capable of evolution, given the right circumstances." His words reminded me of something Tom used to say when I would get frustrated with difficult parents during parent-teacher conferences. "Everyone is doing the best they can with the tools they have. Our job is to offer better tools when we can, and grace when we can't." I shared this with Hector, who nodded appreciatively. "Your husband? Sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," I agreed. Not perfect by any means, but wise about important things. Tell me about him? Hector asked softly. If you'd like to, that is. The invitation, gently offered, opened a floodgate. I found myself sharing stories about Tom that I hadn't told anyone in years, how we'd met at a teacher conference, where he was representing a medical textbook publisher, our early dating mishaps, the way he would leave little notes for me in unexpected places around the house. He sounds wonderful, Hector said when I finally ran out of words. Thank you for sharing him with me. What about your wife? I asked, realizing I knew very little about his past. You've never mentioned her. A shadow crossed his face briefly. Eleanor and I were divorced long before she passed away. It wasn't amicable. I'm sorry, I said, immediately regretting my question. You don't have to talk about it if you'd rather not. No, it's all right, he assured me. It was many years ago now. We married young. Too young, really. Both of us strong-willed, ambitious, with different values that became more pronounced over time. We had 2 children, both grown now with families of their own. By the time our youngest left for college, there wasn't much holding us together. That must have been difficult, I said, thinking of the contrast with my own marriage, which had remained solid until Tom's death. It was, he acknowledged, especially in those days, when divorce was less common and more stigmatized. My mother, in particular, never fully accepted it. But in retrospect, it was necessary for both of us. Eleanor remarried a few years later, a man much better suited to her temperament. They had 15 good years together before her cancer diagnosis. And you? I asked hesitantly. After the divorce. I dated occasionally, he said with a slight smile. Nothing serious until Rebecca, about 10 years ago. We were together for 3 years, even talked about marriage, but ultimately decided against it. She wanted to travel extensively in her retirement, live a more nomadic life. I wanted roots, a home base. Silver Lake, I supplied. Exactly, he nodded. We parted as friends. She sends postcards from whatever exotic location she's exploring, and I send updates about lake life. It works for us. I appreciated his openness, the way he shared his past without bitterness or regret. It struck me that this was one of the gifts of our age, the ability to look back on our lives with perspective, to see the patterns and purposes and experiences that had once seemed merely painful or confusing. And now? I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. What do you want now, Hector? He looked at me directly, his gaze steady and warm. Now, I want what most people want, I suppose. Purpose, connection, joy when possible. He paused, and I find myself increasingly enjoying the company of a certain retired teacher who has recently moved to my lake. The simple declaration, offered without pressure or expectation, touched me deeply. I enjoy your company too, I replied softly. He smiled, reaching over to take my hand. Then that's enough for now, isn't it? To acknowledge that we enjoy each other's company and see where that leads us? I nodded, feeling simultaneously like a seasoned adult with decades of life experience and like a nervous teenager stepping into unknown emotional territory. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, his hand warm around mine, watching the late afternoon light play across the lake's surface. Eventually, Hector stood to leave, mentioning dinner plans with his son and daughter-in-law who were visiting from Chicago. Would you like to join us? He asked. James and Lydia would love to meet you. The invitation caught me off guard. Meeting his children seemed like a significant step, an acknowledgement that whatever was happening between us was serious enough to involve family. Are you sure? I asked. I wouldn't want to intrude on your time with them. You wouldn't be intruding at all, he assured me. In fact, They've been quite curious about the woman their father keeps mentioning in conversation. The idea that Hector talked about me to his children sent a pleasant warmth through me. In that case, I'd be delighted to meet them. Excellent, he said, squeezing my hand once more before releasing it. I'll pick you up at 6:30. We're having dinner at Lakeview Inn. After he left, I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the play of light on water and thinking about the unexpected turns my life had taken. 6 months ago, I had been resigned to a diminishing role in my own home, gradually being edged out of spaces and decisions that had once been mine. Now I was standing on the porch of my own lakeside cottage, preparing to meet the family of a man who clearly cared for me, surrounded by new friends and possibilities. The transformation was so complete it was almost disorienting, yet it had happened one small step at a time. The discovery of the life estate clause, the decision to assert my rights, the choice to seek a new home, the courage to leave familiar surroundings. Each decision had led to the next, creating a path I could never have envisioned from the starting point. That evening, as I prepared for dinner with Hector and his children, I found myself thinking about the concept of renewal. In nature, renewal was constant, seasons changing, plants dying back and regrowing, water evaporating and returning as rain. Why should human lives be any different? Perhaps what I was experiencing wasn't so much a radical transformation as it was a natural renewal, the next season of my life unfolding as it was meant to. I chose a simple dress for dinner, one I had purchased specifically for my new lake life. Comfortable yet elegant, in a deep teal that complemented my silver hair. As I fastened my mother's pearl earrings, I studied my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed more vibrant somehow, her eyes clearer, her posture straighter than the woman who had stood in Derek and Abby's guest bathroom just months ago. "Hello, new Kathy," I whispered to my reflection and smiled. Hector arrived precisely on time, looking handsome in dark trousers and a light blue shirt that brought out the silver in his hair. "You look beautiful," he said simply when I opened the door. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. "So do you. Handsome, I mean, not beautiful. Though you could be beautiful too, I suppose, if you wanted to be. Men can be beautiful." I stopped, mortified by my nervous rambling. Hector just laughed, his eyes crinkling at the corners in a way I found endlessly charming. "I'll take that." As a compliment, however it was intended. "Ready to go?" The Lakeview Inn was a local institution, a restored Victorian building on a bluff overlooking the lake. Its dining room was elegant without being pretentious, with white tablecloths, fresh flowers, and expansive windows showcasing the water views. James and Lydia were already seated when we arrived. They stood to greet us, James immediately recognizable as Hector's son with the same warm brown eyes and strong jawline. Lydia was petite and stylish, with a friendly smile that immediately put me at ease. "Dad's told us so much about you," James said as we shook hands. "We're delighted to finally meet you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, glancing at Hector. "Exclusively," he assured me, pulling out my chair. Dinner proved to be delightful. James and Lydia were engaging conversationalists, clearly interested in getting to know me without being intrusive. I learned that James was an architect specializing in sustainable design, while Lydia taught music at a private school in Chicago. They had 2 children, both in college now, and had recently downsized from their family home to a condominium in the city. "We're trying to convince Dad to spend more time in Chicago," Lydia mentioned as we enjoyed our entrees. "There's so much he's missing. Concerts, museums, restaurants. The lake has its own attractions," Hector replied mildly. "Peace, natural beauty, good company." His gaze flickered to me on the last point, causing James to exchange a knowing look with his wife. "I can see why you'd want to stay," James commented, his tone innocent but his expression mischievous. "The lake does seem to have a lot to offer these days." I felt myself blushing again and took a sip of wine to cover my reaction. Hector deftly changed the subject, asking about his grandchildren's latest activities, and the conversation moved on. By the time dessert arrived, a spectacular chocolate soufflé that the table shared, I felt completely at ease with Hector's family. They had welcomed me without reservation, including me in their jokes and stories as if I were already an established part of their circle. As we prepared to leave, Lydia hugged me warmly. "I'm so glad we got to meet you, Kathy. You've brought a spark back to Dad's eyes that we've missed seeing." "Oh," I said, surprised by her directness. "I don't know about that." I do," she said firmly. "Trust me, we can tell." She glanced at Hector, who was settling the bill with James's assistance. "He deserves happiness. So do you, from what he's told us about your journey." Her words stayed with me on the drive back to my cottage. Deserves happiness. It was a simple concept, yet one I hadn't applied to myself in a very long time. I had been focused on survival, on making the best of difficult circumstances, on keeping peace in my family. The idea that I might actually deserve happiness, might have a right to pursue it actively, felt almost revolutionary. Hector seemed to sense my thoughtful mood. "Everything all right?" he asked as we pulled up to my cottage. "You've been quiet since we left the restaurant." "I'm fine," I assured Hector, turning toward him in the dimly lit car. "Just thinking about something Lydia said." "Should I be worried?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes searching mine. "Not at all. She said something about deserving happiness, and it resonated with me." Hector nodded slowly. "She's a wise woman, my daughter-in-law. Wiser than her father-in-law in many ways." "I doubt that," I said with a small smile. But it made me realize how long it's been since I thought about my own happiness as something I actively deserved. His eyes held mine for a long moment. "I'd very much like to be part of that happiness, Kathy, if you'll allow it." Without overthinking, I leaned forward and kissed him softly. When I pulled back, Hector was smiling. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "But I didn't want to rush you." "Would you like to come in for coffee?" I offered, not quite ready for the evening to end. Inside the cottage, Hector wandered around my living room, examining the photographs I'd arranged on the shelves. He paused before a framed photo of Tom, Abby, and me at Abby's high school graduation. "Your husband?" he asked when I joined him with 2 steaming mugs. "Yes, that's Tom," I confirmed. "Abby looks so young there, doesn't she? 18 and ready to conquer the world." "She has your smile," Hector observed, "and your determined expression." We talked for hours, moving from family stories to deeper topics, our fears, our hopes for the future, the lessons we'd learned from our respective marriages. The conversation flowed naturally, without awkwardness or the need to impress each other. When Hector finally prepared to leave, well after midnight, he kissed me again, more confidently this time, but still with a gentleness that spoke of respect and patience. "Good night, Kathy," he said, his fingers lightly caressing my cheek. "Thank you for a wonderful evening." The next morning, I woke early, my mind already busy with plans for the day. I had promised Abby I would drive into Cedar Creek for Noah's soccer game, and afterward, we were going to visit the Cedar Creek house one final time before the sale to the developers was completed. I arrived at the soccer fields in time to see Noah's team warming up, their small figures in bright blue jerseys running drills on the dewy morning grass. Abby waved from the sidelines where she was setting up folding chairs. "Mom, you made it," she called as I approached. "Noah's been asking every 5 minutes if you were here yet." "I wouldn't miss it," I assured her. "How is he feeling about the game?" "Nervous," she admitted. "They're playing the top team in the league, but he's excited you're here to watch." As if on cue, Noah spotted me from the field and ran over, his face flushed with excitement. "Grandma, did you see me practicing my kicks? Coach says I'm getting really good." "I did see," I confirmed, giving him a quick hug. "You look very professional out there." The game began, and for the next hour, we were fully absorbed in the drama on the field. Noah's team fought valiantly but were clearly outmatched by their opponents. When the final whistle blew, the score was 3-1 in favor of the other team, but Noah seemed unfazed by the loss. "Did you see my almost goal, Grandma?" he asked breathlessly. "Coach said it was the closest we've come to scoring against them all season." "I saw it," I confirmed. "It was spectacular. You've really improved since the last game I watched." After the game, we drove to the Cedar Creek house. It looked different already, even though the demolition hadn't begun. Perhaps it was simply seeing it with new eyes, knowing its fate, or maybe it was the absence of the seasonal decorations and maintained flower beds that had always marked it as a cherished home. "It looks sad," Noah observed as we got out of the car, "like it knows what's going to happen." "Houses can't feel, honey," Abby reminded him gently. "But I know what you mean. It does look different." We walked around to the backyard, where Noah immediately headed for his tree fort. While he climbed up to say his goodbyes, Abby and I wandered through the garden that Tom and I had so lovingly created over the years. "I took cuttings from Dad's rose bushes," I told her, touching a bloom that had miraculously survived without regular care. "They're already rooting in pots at the cottage. I thought maybe you might want some for your new place, too." "I'd like that," she said softly. "A piece of the past to bring into the future." The interior of the house was completely empty, our footsteps echoing on the bare floors. We moved from room to room, Noah asking questions about what each space had been, like when Abby was a child. She obliged with stories, some I remembered vividly and others I had forgotten. In what had been the master bedroom, Abby paused. "This is where Dad died," she said quietly. "I still remember getting the call from you rushing over here." I nodded, the memory still painful despite the years that had passed. "It was quick, at least. The paramedics said he probably didn't suffer long." "Are you really okay, Mom?" she asked. "With all of this?" "I really am," I assured her. 6 months ago, the idea of this house being demolished would have devastated me. But now I see it differently. Life moves forward. We adapt, we rebuild, we find new joy. "Like with Hector?" she asked, a hint of mischief in her voice. I felt my cheeks warm. "You've been talking to Derek, I see. He mentioned there might be a gentleman friend." "I want details, Mom. All of them." I laughed, oddly comfortable discussing this with my daughter. "His name is Hector Ramirez. He's a retired lawyer, a widower with 2 grown children. We volunteer together at the community center, and he has a cabin across the lake from my cottage." "And?" she prompted, clearly expecting more. "And we enjoy each other's company very much," I finished primly, though I couldn't suppress a smile. Abby's eyes widened. "Mom, are you blushing? This is amazing. When do I get to meet him?" "Soon," I promised, both pleased and slightly embarrassed by her enthusiasm. "He's very interested in meeting you and Noah, too." That evening, after returning to the cottage, I received a call from Abby. Her voice was tight with emotion. "Mom, Derek heard from the development company today. They're moving up their timeline. The demolition crew is coming to the Cedar Creek house on Monday." "Monday?" I repeated, surprised by the accelerated schedule. "That's very soon." "I know," Abby said, her voice cracking slightly. "I thought we'd have more time. We only said goodbye to it today, and now it'll be gone so quickly." "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly. "Do you want me to drive in? We could go see it one more time tomorrow." "No," she said after a moment. I think today's goodbye was the right one. It's just the suddenness of it that caught me off guard. Monday dawned clear and bright, a perfect summer day. I spent the morning at the community center in town, where I had begun volunteering with a children's reading program. As I drove home afterward, I realized that at that very moment, the demolition crew was likely beginning its work on the Cedar Creek house. When I arrived at the cottage, a familiar car was parked in the driveway, Derek's sleek black sedan, unexpected on a Monday afternoon. I found him sitting on my porch swing, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "Derek?" I said, as I approached. "Is everything all right?" He stood when he saw me. "They're fine. Abby's at work. Noah's at his friend's house. I hope you don't mind me coming by unannounced." In the kitchen, I made sandwiches while Derek sat at the small table, unusually quiet. Finally, as I set a plate in front of him, I asked directly, "What brings you out here in the middle of a workday, Derek?" He sighed. "The demolition started this morning." "I assumed it would," I nodded. "Is that why you're here? To tell me in person?" "Partly," he admitted. "And partly because—" I wanted to apologize. The statement was so unexpected that I couldn't hide my surprise. "Apologize? For what?" Derek met my gaze directly. "For how I treated you in that house. For trying to push you out without consideration. For your feelings or your rights. For making you feel unwelcome in your own home." I studied his face. The remorse in his expression seemed genuine. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued, "about how I approach relationships, how I tend to prioritize my own needs and plans. Watching the house come down this morning, a house that meant something to so many people, not just me, it really drove home how selfish I've been. We all have our blind spots," I said finally. "The important thing is recognizing them when they're pointed out to us." "Like you did with that life estate clause," he acknowledged with a rueful smile. "That was a wake-up call I probably needed." At the door, as he prepared to leave, he hesitated. "There's one more thing, Catherine. A favor, actually." "What is it?" I asked, curious. "Abby and Noah will be out here a lot this summer with Noah's day camp. I was hoping. Well, I'd like to repair our relationship too. Maybe I could join them sometimes. Get to know this new life you've built." The request touched something unexpected in me, a willingness to forgive that I hadn't fully acknowledged before. "I'd like that," I said simply. "You're always welcome here, Derek." 2 weeks later, Abby, Derek, and Noah arrived for their first weekend stay at the cottage since the demolition of the Cedar Creek house. They brought pictures of the empty lot where the house had once stood, a flat, bare expanse of dirt waiting for new construction to begin. "It's strange," Abby commented as we looked at the photos together on my porch. "I thought seeing it gone would be more painful, but it's just a place now, not our place anymore." "That's how I felt when I moved," I told her, "as if I was leaving behind a shell, not a home." Noah, bored with adult conversation, had already raced down to the dock where Hector was waiting to take him fishing. The two had met the previous weekend and had formed an immediate bond, much to my delight. "Hector's good with him," Derek observed, watching them from the porch. "Noah hasn't stopped talking about going fishing with Grandma's friend all week." "He's good with everyone," I replied, unable to keep the fondness from my voice. "It's just his nature." Derek and Abby exchanged a knowing look. "So," Abby said casually, "is it serious between you two?" I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. "I don't know if serious is the right word at our age. We're not teenagers planning a future. We're just enjoying each other's company, taking each day as it comes." "It looks like more than that to me," Abby remarked, watching as Hector patiently showed Noah how to bait a hook. "You both seem happy. really happy. We are, I admitted, happier than I expected to be at this stage of my life. Later that evening after dinner, we all gathered around a small fire pit that Hector had helped me build near the shoreline. Noah roasted marshmallows, getting more sticky sugar on his face than in his mouth, while the adults sipped wine and watched the sunset paint the lake in brilliant colors. "It's beautiful here," Derek said quietly. "I can see why you fought so hard to make your own way, Catherine. This place suits you." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched by his acknowledgement. "It's become home in a way I never expected." As darkness fell and stars appeared above the lake, I looked around at the circle of faces illuminated by firelight. Abby, laughing at something Hector had said. Derek, more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. Noah, his face a picture of pure joy as he created the perfect toasted marshmallow. And Hector, catching my eye across the flames with a smile that warmed me more than the fire. 6 months ago, I had stood in the rain watching Derek change the locks on what was once my home, feeling lost and betrayed. I could never have imagined then that his cruel action would lead me here, to this peaceful shoreline, to new friendships, to unexpected love, to a life that felt more authentically mine than anything I had known before. The deed to the Cedar Creek house had indeed contained a secret clause, one that had protected my right to a home. But the true gift of that clause had not been the legal leverage it provided. Rather, it had been the push I needed to discover what home really meant to me, not just a physical structure, but a place where I could be fully myself, surrounded by people who valued me for exactly who I was. As Noah drifted to sleep against my shoulder and conversations quieted, I gazed out at the moonlight silvering the lake's surface and felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey had been difficult, filled with painful goodbyes and uncertain beginnings. But sitting here now, I knew without doubt that I had found exactly where I belonged. Sometimes, I reflected, the most devastating endings lead us to the most beautiful beginnings. All we need is the courage to walk through the door that unexpectedly opens before us, and the wisdom to recognize when it's time to claim the happiness we truly deserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.